Welcome to today's presentation, which is a data analytics research proposal to help us understand challenges that our fundraising team has been encountering. My name is LHale, and as you know, I'm the Chief Business Officer here at the Michigan Science Center. Our Science Center is a well-known and well-loved organization located here in Midtown Detroit. Our institution is 12 years old, but built on the foundation of the Detroit Science Center, which closed in 2011. We have a small staff of about 30 regular, full, and part-time employees and serve nearly 200,000 people each year, both on-site and through community outreach. In recent years, our fundraising team has experienced some concerning trends that they want to better understand with the goal of increasing contributions to the organization. The precise business challenge that we are proposing an analysis of is that the museum's unrestricted contributions are consistently not meeting budgeted goals year over year. To get into the specifics of this business challenge, it is important to understand the who, what, when, where, and why of the challenge. In this case, we are talking specifically about our fundraising or development team. This includes our Chief Development Officer, who oversees the overall strategy of the department, our Director of Individual Giving and Membership, and our grant writer and administrator. For the past 3 years, this department has not met budgeted goals each year. The organization presents an annual budget, which is approved by the Board of Directors. As Chief Business Officer, I have a heavy hand in creating the earned revenue components of this budget based on historical trends, strategic priorities, and annual projections. We know that there is an estimated amount of annual unrestricted contributed income that has traditionally been projected successfully that is tied to attendance. We have been able to meet our increased attendance goals, if not exceed them, year over year. In fact, we have actually seen about a 10% increase in our attendance every year for the last 3 years. Unfortunately, our fundraising team has not been able to keep up with annual contributions, and these have in fact dropped below the amount that we were bringing in pre-pandemic, when our attendance levels were lower. The team has, however, been successful in soliciting several grants that are specifically designated to our education programs and new exhibit development. While these grants are wonderful, their restricted nature prohibits us from using them for the majority of the museum's expenses. Therefore, it is very important that the fundraising team understand the factors at play that impact their ability to raise unrestricted annual contributions. Like any business, even a nonprofit, it is imperative to have diverse sources of revenue. Earned revenue is one leg of that income stool. Restricted grants are another, and unrestricted contributions are the third. At the Michigan Science Center, we lean too heavily on two legs of the stool, earned revenue and restricted contributions. The museum is at risk based on factors that we have no control of. For example, when the pandemic happened, earned revenue dropped significantly due to forced closures for public health and safety. We are also at a point in time where many grants are being retracted, particularly government grants, putting the institution at risk if it cannot complete projects. If the museum cannot increase its annual unrestricted contributions that come particularly from individuals, it will continue to be at risk based on these external factors. The historical memory of the Detroit Science Center's permanent closure in 2011 is tied to the gradual loss of unrestricted donations that happened over decades. So it is imperative that our fundraising team do an in-depth analysis of this business challenge in order to develop interventions that will prevent that same future for the Michigan Science Center. There are 4 key members who will help support the analysis of data for this business challenge. The first of those is the Chief Development Officer. This person has been with the organization for 6 months, and it is worth mentioning that the entire fundraising team has had significant turnover in the last 4 years. Each member of the fundraising team has been hired within the last 6 months, and prior to that, their roles have changed over at least once, if not more. The next person on the team is the museum's Chief of Staff. The Michigan Science Center does not have a human resources department that is internal, but instead partners with an external human resources firm. The Chief of Staff is the primary connector and communicator between the museum staff and this company and has deep historical knowledge into the human resources issues and successes of the museum over the last several years. The Chief of Staff also has access to reports and important information from the human resources system that will factor into the analysis. The third person on this team is the Director of Individual Giving and Membership. This person oversees the primary programs that support annual unrestricted contributions to the museum, such as our annual fundraising event in the fall and our annual campaign, which is done through social media, email, and mail, and happens at the end of the year. This person also oversees the museum's robust membership program, which currently has over 3,000 household members, average for museums of the size of the Michigan Science Center. The fourth and final person on this team is a business analyst who is coming in to support from my team and who is responsible for analysis of museum trends in their day-to-day work. This person can also pull financial reports and is adept at statistical analysis. To better understand the analysis that we are embarking on, it's important to look at our data table. Here, we will review 5 hypotheses, the variables needed to test them, the variable types, our data source, whether or not this is new or existing data, the function, the data type, and then our proposed inferential statistical test. It's important for you to understand that some of this data is new and will take time and resources for us to gather. Our first hypothesis is that if the fundraising staff can develop longer-term relationships with donors, then unrestricted contributions will increase. This hypothesis is based on an assumption that the high turnover in the department has greatly impacted the relationships that our donors have with the museum, as their points of contact have been lost or changed frequently. Our predictor variable is annual employee turnover year over year. Our criterion variable will be donation levels from each of those years. We can easily pull annual turnover reports from the fundraising department from our HR system. And we can easily pull annual unrestricted giving reports from our constituent relationship management or CRM system. This means we can compare unrestricted donation levels during times of high turnover in the fundraising department to times of low turnover, understanding if there is a correlation between these two variables. Our second hypothesis is that if fundraising staff have access to all constituencies who interact with the museum, then unrestricted donations will increase. To test this, we will need to get our predictor variable through a review of all of the systems that interact with constituents, and our donation levels are the criterion variable. We will source the predictor variable from departmental focus groups, which will be a new data collection for us. We know that we have many different systems, but we do not have a full scope of just how many are in use for all of the different constituencies or customers who engage with the museum. We are predicting that connecting data in disparate systems will enable the fundraising team to solicit new donors, therefore increasing annual donation levels over time. This will be determined through using a t-test. Our third hypothesis is that if the fundraising staff are trusted to try best practice strategies for the annual campaign, then unrestricted donations will increase. The first variable we will need to test, our predictor variable, is a benchmark report. This is a new report that we will create through an industry survey of similar sized science museums, both regionally and across the country. And then our criterion variable are donation levels measured through the CRM report. We predict that implementing best practices from high-performing organizations will increase annual donations. Our new Chief Development Officer has identified that there are several things the museum does not do that other similar museums, anecdotally, seem to be doing and having success with. This survey and testing some of those best practices over the next year will really help us understand if there's a correlation between the implementation of those best practices and an increase in unrestricted donations. The fourth hypothesis is that if the director has more time for donor engagement by hiring an administrative position, then unrestricted donations will increase. This predictor variable will again be measured through a benchmark report using an industry survey, which is a new report, and our criterion variable will be donation levels measured through the CRM report. With this analysis, we predict that hiring an administrative position will allow the director to have more time with donors, which will ultimately increase annual donations. Currently, our Director of Individual Giving and Membership must do all of the administrative tasks associated with a membership or a donation that comes in. This includes recording it in the CRM system if it's a membership, recording it in the ticketing system, printing and mailing membership cards, and printing and mailing donation letters for tax purposes. This takes hours of time that could be better spent by that position engaging directly with donors. Therefore, this hypothesis will be measured through a correlation test. If an administrative assistant comes on board, once they are onboarded and the director has more time, will we see an increase in donations after she has been able to spend more of that time with our donors? Our last and fifth hypothesis is that if the fundraising staff can learn about new projects sooner, then unrestricted donations will increase. In previous years, the museum developed projects, be they education programs or exhibits, within the departments responsible for those areas. When the new Chief Development Officer started, she requested that her staff be engaged in the early stages of project development in the hopes that they would be able to make connections more easily to individuals who may be interested in contributing to those projects. Since these projects are funded in part by general operating dollars, donations, even though restricted, help support the general operating budget. To better understand the variable of this hypothesis, an employee survey deployed after each project is completed will be useful to help measure how engagement changes over the course of this year and compare annual giving from prior years using a t-test when the fundraising team was not involved in projects from the beginning. Finally, it's worth noting that many of these tests are correlation tests, and correlation does not equal causation. If more than one hypothesis prove to be true, it will be important to further analyze the challenge to understand what may be its true cause. We are excited to embark on this project as we feel it will be very beneficial to the fundraising team, the entire institution, and in fact the museum field to understand the factors which can impact unrestricted contribution levels increasing or decreasing within an organization. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to this project.